Hello everyone, welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultural Perspectives, right? So in this module, we are talking about norms, ability and masculinity. So in this lecture number 18, I'm going to focus on disability, norms and ability. So this is a little bit complex lecture. So what I have done for you to make it easy, I'll keep explaining the slides. So this will be more on slide than on me because each points are important because that is going to set the base which I will be explaining further in the lecture, like let's say for example masculinity, or let's say for example ability and their connections and all this. Before that I was talking about that what is a norm? Norm is basically nothing, unwritten rules which is expected from us to perform, right? Which is expected from us to behave in a particular way, right? So if we do so, it becomes a kind of a norm for us. And I'm sure that I have been keep telling it in case you missed it, that every society has its own way to work, right? Every society has own norms, which means. So it depends where we are. And as I also told that it is flexible, right? It evolves. Flexible means depends, it's like not rigid. It depends on certain economic, political context through which they change. And then if you move from another society, then also it change. So let's look at the slide number 1, right? So in modern discourse, disability and ability are not only defined by biological or physical differences, but are deeply embedded in cultural norms, social practices. So disability studies challenges the unconventional dichotomy between ability and disability by interrogating the social norms that shape these distinctions. So what is the job of disability studies? The discipline, what it does, right? What is the job of the discipline? Disability studies job is to challenge the dichotomy that is very rigidly, tightly strengthened by different bodies, right, or different societies. So let's say for example, if you are able-bodied, right, and you are constantly working on given set of standards and behaviors. So disability job is to find out the paradox, the conflict, which you remember I talked in the ideology of ability. These conflicts is very important because ideology of ability doesn't let us unmask the contradiction that it has. All right. So once we are able to unlock them, we can easily dismantle the hierarchy established by ability, where it superimposes that it is able, it's a strong, it's a superior than disability, right? So we have to also see that how these differences, right, these differences are deeply embedded in cultural norms or social practices, right? How they are embedded in social norms and cultural practices. So our job is to explore these norms, how they define, constrain. Look at the slide, please. We must explore the way in which norms define, constrain, and often marginalize people with disabilities, emphasizing how these norms are not only arbitrary, right? Look at this, that's a point, because as I have talked about in the previous lecture, that it looks norm is like more natural, but that's not the point, right? Norms are not natural. They are very much cultural, right? They are very much cultural. So only arbitrary, but deeply rooted in historical, political and cultural context. So we must revalue. So these norms are very instrumental in shaping societal views of disability, and they establish and expected standards of behavior, appearance and function by which people are measured, right. So, this disability is in force, very narrow definition of what is called able-bodied and what's called norm, right. If you see that, in fact, sometime I teach my students that if you are able, which means you're performing norms, right, you are normal. So, normal and able-bodied, they both are synonymous to each other. They both are share the experiences, right. So, arbitrary, as we know that the moment we shift from one culture to another, when we move from one culture to another, it becomes arbitrary, right. It's not natural, because natural means across boundaries, across universe, things will remain the same. It will not change, it will not affect, it will keep maintaining what it is. But arbitrary simply means that it depends the kind of society we are in, right, and that will define our notion or standards, all right. So, there is a famous sociologist which I have been talking about. Look at the slide, please. Erving Goffman, right. I told his book is very famous. See, I have been keep telling you that please read his book, because he will keep cropping up. So, in his analysis of stigma, he explains how deviation from the normative body are socially penalized. And that's not the point, only that they are penalized, right. It's not like that if you deviate from the norm and you are penalized. But the problem is, this punishment looks as if it is just for the society, as if it is normal and natural you to get punished because you deviated from the norm. You got the point? That's the key point, right? So, it looks as if it's natural you are being punished. So, penalization, right, punishment, deviation from the norm is natural. People find it just. Let us say, for example, if you look at your society, I mean, still I find in certain society, husband beating his wife is normal, right? Because they say that, okay, wife must have done something bad and that's why she's being punished, and no one interferes in the business of husband and wife. In fact, even today, I'm not like even the court cases are running, but they're not very particular about the civil problems. It looks like as if it doesn't matter much. However, there is a violence. However, there is a blot in our justice, right? If it is being done in our society, women being beaten up. But the point is that what I'm trying to suggest is here, the point I'm making is that it looks just like, okay, he has right to do so, right? It's fine, there's no problem, right? This is what I'm talking about in the context of disability. If you deviate from the norm and you are being punished, but the problem is that your punishment is natural because that's how society thinks about you, right? So, disability within this framework is not simply a physical or cognitive difference, right? Not thinking about that, it's more about difference, but it's a deviation. That's a more point, right? The more important point is that it's not just about physical difference, but it's more about deviation from an idealized norm. That's a point. So, I mean, I just see, obviously, I mean, it's very linked that difference leads to deviation, but I would say that even if a difference can comply, let's say supergrip, right, despite the difference, bodily difference, I mean, this is also very rigid and stupid notion, right? We all are different from each other in some way or other way, our hair, our look, our appearance. I don't understand how people talk about this physical and cognitive difference, because everyone is different, right, from each other. They all are. Okay, so let's say, for example, the very medical notion is 2 hands, 2 legs, certain way, not very being particular about the minor difference. But again, how do you constitute, right? How do you define the very idea of a minor difference? I mean, I don't know, I don't get it, how people talk about it. But anyway, so this deviation, this is a point what I'm talking about, this is more to do with deviation from an idealized norm, right? It's a deviation from idealized norm. And that leads to discrimination, that leads to exclusion, that leads to stigma. You got the point? So, not more to do with your physical and cognitive difference, but more to do with your deviation from the idealized norm that leads to discrimination, exclusion, and stigma. You got the point, right? So look at the slide, please. So cultural norms perpetuate an ableist ideology whereby the body and mind must meet certain physical, mental, and sensory standards to be deemed acceptable. So by framing disability as a deviation rather than a legitimate variation of human experience, society creates hierarchies of value among people. So disability scholar like Leonard J. Davis, he has pointed out the concept of normalcy is a relatively modern invention that emerged alongside industrialization, statistical reasoning, the notion of a normal or ideal body, which you can find in detail if you please read Enforcing Normalcy. I mean, this is what, I mean, these are the books you must read, you see, and there he's talked about eugenics and all to great extent, and this is where there's a chapter, obviously read introduction, but another chapter is constructing normalcy, right? So this notion of a normal and ideal body often disregards the diversity of human forms and capacities, marginalizes those who do not conform. So that's another problem is that what does norm do? Norm doesn't allow us to think in terms of accepting the differences. It doesn't allow us to talk about or celebrating the diversity. For this, it is as if there are diversity, but let's not talk about it. They must all comply with one notion of bodily idea, right? Ideal body, whatever. You all keep striving for you should all have a fight for that. But again, we all know it's not possible, is it? No, it's not possible. Can you all have same kind of a body, strength, emotional stability? No, you cannot. It's impossible. But still, if you see that we are indulged in the rat race without questioning this, because this is a simple thing that nature cannot equate everyone. No one be similar to everyone. It's not the point. We have to change our way of thinking about humanity, right? Look at the slide, please. So Davis critiques the ableist foundation of modern society, which equates value with the ability to produce economic value, right? And sidelining people with disabilities as non-contributor. So this binary of ability versus disability is not only a cultural construct, but it also deeply economic one. See, when I'm saying deeply economic one, I'm aware of this very fact that that economic influence culture. It's not that there is no role of economy in shaping culture. It's very important. They go side by side. They talk to each other. They communicate with each other. But the concern which I am talking about here is that it's not only culture, but it also depends economy, like how much work you can produce, right? How much effort you can put in to produce a labor, right? How much you can generate. Let's say, for example, when the factories got established, then like say the role of time. Time started deciding who will work for what period of time, how long will they work, how long will they not work. This all started coming in between, right? And then when this all keep coming over there, and then people started working from 10 to 5 or 10 to 8, and then another important factor becomes who can produce more labor power, who is more efficient, right? So let's say, for example, you can produce, let's say, 10 biscuits in a 1 hour, but there is a person who can produce more than 50 biscuits in a 1 hour. So it means that he is more acceptable in that society, not the one who is able to just produce 10 biscuits in 1 hour. So here you see the point what I am making, the concern that I am raising is that how this important notion of economy, right, has influenced the notion of ability. So this ableist assumptions has created more problem with people with disability, and that is why Leonard J. Davis, to a very great extent, he is talking in his books that this norm is very new concept. This is not be had in the Greek society. You can go and check it. There is no such word in 16th century. You will not find any particular writing about it, particular person talking about the concept of a norm in 16th, 17th. This is 18th century. People are again talking about average, people are talking about norm, late 18th century, so on and so forth. And that's why this becomes very significant to understand that how society shapes our perception about certain bodies and how it also changes it, right? When I will come to Indian context and will give you a lot of examples which I am going to talk in the next module, but not in this, but in this module we have to more talk about masculinity, we have to talk about ideology of ability and all that. So the point what I am talking about, that how social model of disability posits that disability is created by social barriers, right, rather than individual environment. So see, this perspective is directly hinting towards that how a society evolved and it created a problem for people with disability, right? That's why they say that disability is not an inherent lack, but it's a difference, right? It's a difference that become that disabling only when social structure fail to accommodate diverse abilities, right? So diverse abilities is not able to accommodate. So once like you have a set of structure, environmental structure, political structure, social structure, civic structure, behavioral structure, where what you see that certain are not able to be accommodated, they have a problems, and then the problem start occurring, they become disabled, right? So let's say, for example, for instance, a person who uses a wheelchair is not disabled by wheelchair itself, but by architectural environment. That's a conflict that you see if you go deep into the notion, but the problem is that it does not emerge when we explore, right? When we explore these society, and that's only possible to explore these conflicts when we do disability studies, right? So it's not disabled by the wheelchair itself, but the architectural environment that lack accessibility features, right? So wheelchair is a result of architectural environment, right? It's not that wheelchair is a problem, right? It's architectural environment is a problem. So social model challenges this conventional definition of ability, suggesting that society's norm should adapt to include a variety of bodies and minds, right? So the point what I'm making is simple. The point I'm making is this, that we never think that why is he using wheelchair? Is a wheelchair usage of a wheelchair is a problem, or the reason which has forced him to use the wheelchair is a problem, right? Think about it. But we never pay attention to this, right? We never think about these in that direction, and that's become problematic. All right, so think in that direction. Go to the next slide, please. And you see this slide, cultural representation I'm talking about, right? So, I mean, this is not very important, but Similinton has provided a counter narrative like works highlight the agency, resilience, unique perspective, emphasizing the need for culture norm that recognizes disability as a diversity which has to be overcome, right? Which has to be overpowered. So it's only we can only do it when we are able to shift the boundaries, right? When we are able to shift the boundaries. And shifting the boundaries would become only possible when we challenge actually where the problem lies. Problem is lying somewhere else, we are hitting something else. That's why disability studies emerges, right? That's the only reason why do we have disability studies, to challenge those previous notions to include. So that's why, like, how do we have a universal design, right? Like, look at this slide, please. So universal design promotes the creation of product and environment accessible to all is one approach that challenges normative assumptions. Universal design doesn't see disability as a limitations, right? But as a guiding principle for creating, this is what we have been fighting for, inclusive spaces that benefit everyone. So, for example, in education, inclusive pedagogy embraces diverse learning styles and abilities, challenging the normative curriculum that assumes a one-size-fits-all model of learning, right? So, by valuing diverse cognitive abilities, that's what we have to question, this one-size-fits-all, like who does this, who decides it, how it is decided, we have to question that. And we have to move towards diverse cognitive abilities. That's a shift we have to make. Educator can create learning environments where all students, including those with disability, have the opportunity to thrive. So this relationship between disability, norms and ability, this reveals how deeply entrenched societal standards shape our understanding of what it means to be human. Disability is not an individual problem to be fixed, but a reflection of society that fails to accommodate diverse bodies and minds. And that's why we have to keep fighting, keep thinking in a different direction. Until and unless we think in a different direction, it's not possible for us to reshape the notion of a body or disability. So, for example, what we have been doing it. So, we have been thinking about, like what I was just a couple of minutes before I was trying to suggest, one size fits all. This is problematic, right? You have already decided that, okay, this is good, this is superior, this is wonderful, this is nice, and you are asking everyone to adequate to that, to fit into this, right? You have a box, you have already created a box, and you are putting the things into this, you are trying to ask them to jump into this, and if they are not able to fit into this, they are not able to live properly the way you have designed the boxes, then you don't see that the box is a problem, right? You see the people are not able to adjust to that, people are not able to be accommodated, and that becomes important concern, that becomes important problem for you, for us, and that's why inclusive society, inclusive space is not possible until unless we start challenging this previous notion of one size fits all, right? This, which is governed basically by ableist assumptions, right? What does ableist assumptions do? They assume that you should be like this, you should behave like this, you should do like this, you should wear something like this, you should perform in a particular way, and this becomes entirely problematic notion. So look at the slide, please. So here we see rethinking ability, right? I have asked you to rethink. That's very important, right? Rethinking ability, because this has already gained its momentum and it can only be challenged when we start rethinking ability, right? Because Until unless we reframe, we reorganize, rethink, it's not possible we come up with a new idea. So rethinking ability requires moving beyond a narrow definition of normalcy and embracing a view of a human variation that values all forms of embodiment. That's important, right? All forms of embodiment. That's how we have to think about ability. So by challenging normative standards, society can move towards inclusivity, ensuring people with disabilities are not marginalized but are recognized as equal participants with unique perspectives and contribution, right? So the point what I'm making, right, to conclude my lecture, I would try to say that we can do this when we start rethinking about ability. By rethinking about ability, we can rethink the notion of the norm, right? We can rethink about the notion of the cultural, political norms. And as I have been constantly telling that, and then we have to strengthen it, we have to stretch it so that every other bodies, not be just because of their physical differences, not because of their cognitive differences that's excluded, but we start believing that it's a celebration of the diversity. That's a more significant to have a meaningful cultural society, right? Cultural society, if it's a meaningful, it's a wonderful, good. It's not that which fails to accommodate, only certain kind of a people. All right. So with this, thank you so much for your patient listening to me. Stay tuned for next coming lectures. Bye bye.